Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Wednesday, July 31st around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking a little bit about Michigan. The punishment sounds like is going to come out pretty soon for the Michigan sign stealing scandal, and we will get into all of the details on that. Definitely a very interesting thing that is going to unfold over really the next about 6 months to a year with some of the legal battles, but we'll get into all the details there. Then we'll get into some of the ACC breakdown. We'll get a little bit on every single team, just quick thoughts there. Then we'll get into ACC picks. We'll break down all of my picks for the ACC schedule. Definitely a little bit weirder than the first 2 days in the SEC and the Big Ten, so definitely a cool one today. Then we'll get into schedules around the Power Four. We'll get into who the winners, who the losers, who are the people that, have it pretty easy this year, who are the ones that are going to be facing a fight pretty much every single weekend. And then we'll get into Wednesday what ifs, and we'll do kind of a week one edition, some of the different questions I have around week one, including what happens if there is a blowout in the Notre Dame Texas A&M game. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcspodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to kind of have a fun, interactive experience here, and I think that's always good for the both of us. Again, if you would like to use that, that is gsmcspodcast.net. But let's get into the Michigan punishment, because this has kind of been going around the Twitterverse, going around, college football world for the last couple of days, that it is likely going to be coming out pretty soon. The NCAA is likely to make their decision on what the punishment will be for the sign stealing allegations that unfolded pretty much last year, but have been unfolding for the last couple of years, it seems, at Michigan. And a lot of different things go into this, obviously. Connor Stalions is at the very center of this. He will likely be the one that's facing the most of the brunt, all right? He's the one that's definitely going to get the most attention, I suppose, as we get into this. It sounds like Jim Harbaugh is not mentioned in the report that came out a couple of days ago, which is a little bit crazy to me. I'll be totally honest with you. I think the head coach of a team that, if you're willing to ban them from multiple postseasons, which is something that they're kicking around the idea, whether it's 2 or 1 year postseason ban plus a big time fine. Michigan doesn't much care about the big time fine, but on the other side of things, that will definitely create some more questions, which we'll get into here in a second. But in the hypothetical where you are willing to suspend a team from the postseason for 2 years, the head coach of that team not getting any punishment is a little bit wild to me. I understand he's in the NFL. I understand he has left the university, but it still feels a little bit weird that Jim Harbaugh just kind of up and left and is scot-free, I suppose. So that's a little bit weird. Definitely something that is going to get the NCAA a little bit of heat during this process, but overall, Connor Stalions is also facing failure to cooperate in the investigation. That makes sense from what everything we heard last year. Doesn't sound like he was very inclined to help out by any means, so that's not necessarily overly surprising. No current Michigan staffers are facing allegations of violation, so that's a little bit interesting. Definitely something that kind of lends itself to maybe they didn't quite find exactly what everyone expected them to find in this investigation. Maybe they didn't find, very specific things. They did say that one coach allegedly deleted text messages between him and Connor Stalions. That's really weird, right? That's definitely something that I'd like to know who that coach is. I'd like to know what the texts were, all of that information, but it's definitely one of those things that if you can't recover the text, then you can't really know what was said, and you can't necessarily punish the coach for that. So it's it'll be an interesting battle back and forth, but one of the big time things here is if the NCAA does kind of ban them for the postseason, whether it's 1 or 2 seasons, it sounds like 2 seasons might be on the table, a little bit more than 1, but I would probably lean more towards 1. The question is, what happens, to the past wins and the past, national championship that they just won? Sounds like those are safe. It sounds like they will not be touched and definitely will not be something that is included in this case, vacating those wins or anything like that. So something that definitely people will have some mixed opinions on. But overall, I think if you can't necessarily prove that there was an aggressive advantage made by this, then I guess you can't necessarily take away those wins. So I'm not necessarily overly against that by any means, but the big time question here is, what does Michigan do on the backside of it? Because the reality is, once all of this information started to roll out, Michigan probably started to make some plans, and I think they were likely legal plans, because if you were going to bar them from the postseason, you are likely taking a lot of money out of their pocket. And if you can't necessarily prove that, there was this massive advantage found, and obviously more of this information will come out and we'll absolutely unpack it as it does. But overall, it sounds like Michigan is going to fight this postseason ban once it is handed down. And that's definitely something that will be really interesting to watch over the next little bit. But let's just say the 2-season postseason ban goes through. Let's just say they are barred from the postseason for the next 2 years, and then in 2026 they get, or I guess it would be 2027 because they can't be banned this year. But overall, if they, get a chance after 2 years to get back into the dance, but in those 2 years, a lot can happen. This is a very, very quickly changing sport, and I think there's too many people in that conference now for Michigan to take their foot off the gas pedal. When you add teams like Oregon and USC and Washington, and then you already have teams like Nebraska and Iowa and Wisconsin that are already making some changes in their program, add that to Ohio State and Penn State already, you're going to have to, be on your game 24/7, 365. That's just the reality of this game right now. And if you can't be that, if you can't be all the way locked in, and especially if you're barred from the postseason, you're going to struggle in a number of different ways. Whether that's, transfer portal guys, they're not going to come in because they don't have all the time in the world. They don't necessarily have 2-3 years for this postseason ban to expire so they can play meaningful football at the end of the season again. So that's kind of the big thing here is it could really affect this team in a number of different ways. And transfer portal is just a part of it. Recruiting could definitely be another part where if you're a freshman kid that's coming into Michigan, obviously you're not necessarily expecting to start, but you want to be a part of a postseason run. That's just the reality of the sport when all of the onus is put on the playoff, which I don't necessarily love too much, but that's the reality of it right now. If that's the case, then kids are not going to look your direction if you have no earthly shot to get in. It sounds like the college football playoff would abide by this if it was handed down by the NCAA. So this is obviously something that Michigan's going to want to fight because you will get affected in recruiting. You will get affected in the transfer portal. You will get affected in NIL. And I think that might be the most important part where there are some boosters that, frankly, they're not the most die-hard college football fans. They're not the most die-hard Michigan football fans, but they see Michigan ticking up in the rankings. They see that record getting better and better last year, and they start to buy in. That's just the reality of a lot of pretty much every single program out there has those types of donors, and you'd likely lose them pretty quickly if you had a postseason ban because you don't necessarily have the same draw. You don't necessarily have the same allure to those casual fans, if you will. So that's a big battle that they're going to be able to fight over the next little bit. And if it's a 1-year postseason ban, I think that's something that won't necessarily hurt too bad, but absolutely can have an effect. We'll obviously figure out what the big-time effects of that could be. But overall, I think 2 seasons would be just a little bit too long. It would definitely be a problem for Michigan. Not to say that I wouldn't necessarily give them a 2-year postseason ban. I would tend to lean towards 1, but overall, if more information comes out, my entire tune on this could totally change. But overall, I think when we talk about this, they're going to fight this. There's no two ways about that. There have been some people that have poked fun at it saying, why would you have to fight back if you didn't cheat? That's a little bit ridiculous. Obviously, you're going to fight back if you feel like it's going to do something negative to your program. There's no two ways about that. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you did. You're definitely going to try to fight it if you feel like you have grounds to fight it. So Michigan is definitely doing, hypothetically, the right thing here. And I think when you look at the conference that they're in, the landscape in college football right now, they can't miss a beat. So they definitely need to fight it if the postseason ban does come down. Now, how much success they'll have there, I don't know. It definitely will be an interesting fight and one that will likely yield more information about what was happening in Michigan. And I think that's what we all want, right? We definitely want to know more about what was going on, more about, how they were going about business in this new era at Michigan football. And definitely want to know about more what Connor Stallions and what this coaching staff had to play in this part. But overall, I think this will be a very long-winded thing. There's no two ways about that. I don't think Michigan is leaving any stone unturned. I think they're going to try to get out of this any which way possible. And frankly, pretty much every single other school would do the exact same. So it's not necessarily tearing apart Michigan for doing that. It's just to say this is the reality of the sport. You definitely have to fight some legal battles that you didn't used to have to fight, and Michigan got themselves into this battle. There's no two ways about that, but it's definitely going to be a very interesting one. Obviously, we talked about the Netflix special that is coming out around Connor Stallions and the sign stealing scandal and how it's going to be very, very interesting to watch. There's no two ways about that. It's definitely a good idea to get the punishment out there beforehand. Definitely have something on the books, even if you are fighting in courts and doing all of that type of stuff. As long as you have something in writing before that thing comes out, I think you're in good shape, because I talked about it before when I talked about the documentary, but a lot of people are going to make some pretty staunch opinions after that thing comes out, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of that if you're the NCAA. So overall, I think it makes sense that all of this is starting to happen now. I do think Michigan is going to fight this pretty tooth and nail and try to get to the very finish line and definitely try to save themselves from any postseason ban. Whatever the fine is, Michigan will pay that and keep moving forward. I don't think that's ever going to be really much of an issue for Michigan, but overall, there's definitely going to be a lot of stuff here, and there's definitely going to be some more information about how Connor Stallions went about his business, if the coaching staff knew. All of those little details that we've kind of waited for quite some time will start to come out over the next little bit, and we'll get more and more information, but it does sound like the NCAA is going to be battling them for a little bit, and Michigan is going to fight right back, and we'll see what happens there. It's definitely one of those things that took the college football world by storm last year, and it was one of those things that was a little bit hard to wrap your head around because some of the details were very much unknown, and there were a lot of different conspiracy theories and different ideas going around. Now we'll at least know something sort of concrete. I don't think we'll get all the information that we want by any means, but I do think we'll get a little bit more information about what was going on at Michigan, how egregious was it, and do they deserve a 1, 2, 3, whoever, postseason ban. So it's definitely going to be a very, very interesting thing, and I think it's just another chapter in the best reality TV show in the world, which is college football. It'll be very, very weird to watch this unfold, but I'll be watching very closely, obviously, and update you guys with everything that you need to know. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to break down all the ACC teams before we get into our predictions. So just do quick thoughts on all 17 teams in the ACC. So stick around, and we'll be right back with that.